27 July 2017. I wrote a Facebook post about the infamous "we regret to inform you" letters that I had received from my studies and from employment. That post gathered a lot of interest from people from around the world, but the backstory to that post is this. I had a very difficult conversation with a friend of mine. This friend of mine told me that he has been applying for work, for scholarships, and could not find any opportunities. And as he was sharing his story, I said the most insensitive thing: I understand. And he asked me, how could you say you understand? You are successful, you are perfect. And there, I realized that I had curated a life that was not real, that was not honest. It was on social media. And then I thought to myself, if he's thinking this about me, how many other people may have the same impression? And so in a moment of vulnerability, I gathered a couple of my rejection letters, not all of them, and I put them upon social media to share that as all of us are going through life, we don't always get the yeses. And I did a little calculation that for every 1 yes I get approximately 8 no's. Why is that important? Because it's about conversations. I'm going to talk about conversations on a personal level, community level, and a global level. The need for us to be curious and present in deepening empathy. Now, on the personal level, my friend and I didn't always start off in such difficult conversations. Every conversation starts with the most powerful syllable in the world, or syllables in the world: hello. And I had to gather up the courage to say hello. Nobody introduced us. But when I met him or saw him, I wanted to engage and speak to him and build a friendship. And so I gathered up the courage. I had 1,000 words that I was speaking to myself. I had all the butterflies and anxiety. What if I'm rejected? What if I'm judged? What if he doesn't understand? What if he thinks I'm a creep? All of those feelings often cloud and stop us from engaging in conversations. All of us get the sweaty palms. Imagine when you are going to a party and you are going with a friend and your friend doesn't show up. You kind of stand in the corner and you're like, hey, who do I reach out to? Because of the anxiety that comes. And that what happens is that when we don't engage, a cycle of avoidance comes into play. And that cycle of avoidance says that because I've had this conversation that I cannot reach out, I'm not going to do so. I'm going to stand back. And then I step away from invitations that could transform me, conversations that could change my life. And so to break that cycle, I want to encourage us today that we can learn a simple thing to break that cycle of avoidance. You can turn to the person next to you and say hello. And that hello, some of us may be excited because it's somebody that we know who's sitting next to us, and we're happy to say hello. Others of us are probably freaked out at the thought of saying hello to somebody we may not know. But remember both those feelings: the anxiety, the fear of the what-ifs, the excitement and the joy of somebody that we know. Hold those feelings well, because they help us to think about how we can show up in a more authentic way when we go to conversations. Because those conversations, similar to the post that I posted, is that communities started to form. And that's what I'm going to speak about next. The communities that form as a result of conversations we have. And the conversations we need to have are difficult conversations. These conversations often need us to confront the realities that are in front of us. But in order for us to have community conversations, we need to unlearn the art of showing up in perfection. We need to show up in our most weakest, vulnerable state, to be able to fully seen and to be fully heard. But with all conversations, what are we looking for? We're seeking for safety, both in our personal, in the community as well. And that's also not just limited to the people that we may not know or strangers. The pursuit of safety is even for the friends and families we may know all our lives. Can I truly be honest and more authentic self here? And the difficulty of those conversations often means that somebody has to be brave and courageous to start them. I want to implore us today that we can learn to do that. And as we think about these conversations, both on a community level as well, I'm reminded about the time that my grandmother used to make Sunday lunch in Namibia. And a tradition kind of formed where you make a Sunday lunch, you make it a little extra, and then you share with your neighbors, and the neighbors make lunch and then share with you. And what that started to happen is a conversation started to flow about the challenges that are in the community, what are potential solutions that are available for people to seek for. People started to share tools and engage with one another. And all of a sudden, just through food, sharing of food on a Sunday, new communities started to form. I want to implore us as well today to start to have those conversations as well, to be able to share something of yourself that you may love, enjoy, or something that's maybe tough to have a conversation around, and to do so. Because as we have these conversations, it's important that we expand it not to just the local communities, because it happens all the time, right? In buses, we hear conversations. In pubs, we hear conversations. In churches, we hear conversations. All the time, the conversations are happening, and I love it. But those conversations must move us to deepen empathy. And how do we know that? Similar to my friend that I spoke about, the thing that I didn't get right is I didn't listen. Often, we listen with our mind. But I want to ask us if we can listen with not only our mind, but with our heart, with our emotions, and our body. I was quick to say I understand. I did not listen to what he said and what he did not say. Because often the words that we use are but a fraction of what we want to actually articulate. And these conversations help us to not just hear with our ears, but hear who is speaking to us, the person that is sitting in front of us. That often that person who is a miracle and a mystery can be fully seen, heard, understood. Think about the last time you had the most incredible conversation. What was different about that conversation than the rest that you had? Because we have conversations all the time. I would probably say you left leaving that conversation more powerful, more seen, more understood than when you got there. And I think in the world that we're finding ourselves in now, we need to go back to those conversations that asks us to be courageous. And that courage means that I have to start from vulnerability myself. And all of us have to start from that place of vulnerability. Invite somebody else to do the same. And as we expand that conversation on a global scale as well, to think about whose voice is not in the conversation. Whose lived experience are we not hearing? Because often we go into our default, which is put on our earphones, put on our mask, scroll through our phone, because we don't want to see, or we choose not to see, what is in front of us. But those conversations where vulnerability is important cause us and implore us to pull in those who we may not see, who are invisible. I have the privilege, through my work, to work with people from different walks of life, particularly those who are vulnerable, marginalized, and disenfranchised. They sit before me. More often than not, I don't even have a solution. But what I do have is time. Is to say, I see you. I hear you. I may not be always able to fix everything that is in your life, but here's a space for you to just be. We rush through our lives, through relationships, through this world, trying to always give answers, give the correct thing, say the right thing. But more often than not, we miss the point. And that is, do we see one another? Do we leave empowered from a conversation? Or do we leave drained from those conversations? My imploration today is this. Look at the people next to you. They all have their stories, journeys, miracles, wonders that are sitting in front of us. And every one of them are a conversational way that can transform us. And I implore us to invite new people into our space. Speak to people from different economic circumstances, different realities that they come from. Engage people that see the world in a new way. We need those new voices, emerging voices, dissenting voices as part of that conversation on a global scale. Otherwise, what we do is just reproduce who we are. We sound like each other, we speak to each other, and we are literally just having conversations with ourselves. But as we open up, those of us with power is to then make sure that the room is open for new conversations and new voices to also take space. Because that will help us broaden our perspective and deepen empathy. Many a times, every conversation as we go through is an invitation that is happening for us to be transformed. More often than not, every conversation that I speak to with people from all walks of life, whether it's somebody who's lived on the street, a survivor of gender-based violence, somebody who's struggling and has lost a loved one, or somebody who's just saying, I graduated my first degree, in their joys, I always leave more transformed than if I had not had that conversation. And I almost feel like more often than not, they have educated me, but it needed me to be humble, to listen, to switch everything off and be present to the person sitting in front of me. So I want to implore us today, let's take off our headphones, hear the conversations happening around us. Let us take off our masks, the armor that we bear, and smile. Because that's an invitation to say we can speak. And lastly, think about every conversation that you've had so far. And think about how that conversation can transform not just the world, but the world of somebody that's in front of you. Because you never know. You might be 1, 2, or 3 conversations from changing the world. And if you become a safe space for the people standing in front of you, not coming to a building, but you embodying that safety that we all gauge for, as I should have done for my friend, that's when we truly start to see how the world starts to change. Thank you very much.